Ginjo Kugo occupied a genuinely fascinating position within the world and lore of Bleach. Here you have this roguish pariah of a character who was not only revealed to be the surprise main villain of the Lost Agent arc, if it was a surprise to you, but also the first ever Substitute Shinigami, Ichigo's predecessor. The role of Substitute Shinigami is an oddly isolating one, I think, due to how, until this point, Ichigo is the only known character to ever occupy it. And to discover that one came before Ichigo's time not only adds a great deal of mystique to the position, but also legitimacy too. Even just knowing that Ichigo isn't alone in having held this title adds so much to the complex history of the Gotei 13. Unfortunately, Ginjo not being given a concrete backstory within the source material remains one of the most aching disappointments of Bleach, for me at least. One of only a small, very exclusive handful of times I was actually disappointed by what I was reading. I'll never forget chapter 477 ending with that tease of Ginjo as a younger man in a Shinigami Shihakusho, only for 478 to open a week later with nothing. No follow-up whatsoever. I was so unhappy about it, and most of that unhappiness stemmed from just how intriguing Ginjo and his place in the world actually was, and knowing, or at least figuring, I probably wasn't going to learn anything else about it. But I feel like that's a good problem for Kubo to have, right? Like, you have characters so intriguing that you desperately want to find out more about their backstory. Despite being a mix of Shinigami, human, and hollow, Ginjo is interesting because he feels like he has no place in the world of Bleach, like he doesn't belong. He's a drifter, someone on the outskirts of society, and that's why he forms Execution in the first place. It's a refuge for those who feel like he does, like they've been cast out. And feeling pushed to the brink, Ginjo has experienced the grey morality and ruthless persecution of Soul Society perhaps better than anyone else, and had his entire life turned upside down due to the unjust darkness lying at the centre of that very organisation he once called home. While we're only given the tiniest of morsels in regards to both a motivation and a backstory for Ginjo in the source material, the light novel Can't Fear Your Own World finally gave us a real insight into what happened to the first Substitute Shinigami to cause him to turn his back on the Soul Society and start down the dark path he finds himself on when we first meet him. And so in this video we're going to take a look at the hidden backstory of Ginjo Kugo, the truth behind his betrayal, behind his vendetta, that was kept from us in the source material but finally unveiled many years later thanks to the novels. Generally speaking, I find the light novels to be an uneven, mixed bag in regards to quality, but the revelations surrounding Ginjo were much needed and much appreciated. Before we get started on the video, guys, if you haven't hit subscribe yet, make sure to do that now for more Bleach content like this every single week. And if you enjoyed the video, make sure to give it a thumbs up as well to help support me and the channel. If you want to take that support from me another step further, I do also have a Patreon as well. And as always, I want to give a massive shout out and say a huge thank you to everyone supporting me over there on Patreon. I really do appreciate it. And you can also support me in an even easier way by checking out my second channel, Mr. Tomo Talks Games. I'd really appreciate it if you went over there, had a look, and maybe even dropped a subscribe. I'm trying to hit 5,000 subs over there. That would be an amazing milestone. So thank you all so much for your support, no matter what form it takes. And of course, if you are wanting to still read Can't Fear Your Own World, there will be spoilers for the light novels in this video to come. First, let's take a look at what we do actually discover in the source material regarding the supposed villainy of the first Substitute Shinigami, the Lost Agent himself. Now, to be honest, piecing together what we can of Ginjo's words, his stance on the world, and how the Soul Society acts during the final showdown of the Lost Agent arc, we're able to pull together a fairly concise, if not overly compelling, motivation for the character. So much of Ginjo was a mystery, but we can surmise that he became a Substitute Shinigami and worked closely with the Gotei 13, and in particular Ukitake, who was the mastermind behind the Substitute Shinigami program. During his time working for them, Ginjo would discover that the Substitute Shinigami badge he had been issued, allegedly as a way to legitimize him in the eyes of fellow officers, was actually both a means for the Gotei to spy on and control him from afar. The badge monitored his every action, reporting back to the Gotei 13, and even enabled them to freely suppress and control his Reiatsu at will. It allowed the Soul Society to locate him at all times, effectively keeping him on a leash, while he believed he was a valued, active partner. But he was wrong. All along, the people he grew to trust through fighting alongside them in battle had actually never trusted him from the start. It seems they had always and would always see him as an outsider that they could never actually rely on. Ginjo believed that the Soul Society's aim was to train him up, use him as a pawn without ever truly recognizing him before tossing him aside when they were done with him. He believed they originally planned to kill the Substitute Shinigami when they were finished with them, and that everyone but him in the Soul Society knew the truth. Upon realizing this, Ginjo fled the Soul Society, killing numerous Shinigami after stealing their powers during his escape, and becoming a wanted criminal in the process. In the present day, while his actual goal is difficult to pin down, it seems Ginjo wanted to gather enough power to exact some kind of revenge on the Soul Society, and, as he puts it himself, crush the Shinigami who betrayed him. And that's basically everything we can glean from the source material itself. It's really not a substantial amount, and certainly not sufficient for the main villain of an entire arc, albeit a shorter one. What's even more interesting about this whole setup is that Ginjo is painted as being in the wrong here. And of course, he's absolutely a villain in the sense that he manipulates and almost mentally destroys an innocent teenager in his quest for vengeance, making him just as bad as the establishment he wants to bring down. But the Soul Society is actively doing to Ichigo almost exactly what Ginjo predicts. Ginjo claims that they all know the truth about the badge, Ichigo's closest friends that he has made since beginning his work with the Soul Society. Renji, Rukia, Byakuya, Hitsugaya, Zaraki, Ikkaku, all these characters, they know the truth about him, his place in the Gotei, and that they're actually leaving him to die. While not exactly true, the entire reason the captains are there at all is to monitor Ichigo's decision in this final bout. If he chose to side with Ginjo when the truth was revealed to him, they would try and take him down with no hesitation. It's a really cold, thin line to tread. I've always loved how morally grey the Soul Society actually is. Them giving Ichigo his powers back is at first seen as this truly triumphant altruistic act of repayment to someone who saved them all, but in actuality they're doing it so Ichigo can just simply prove his allegiance to them against Ginjo. Maybe there's a semblance of honour here in the fact they're allowing Ichigo to learn the truth at all and make that choice for himself, but the point remains that they would have done whatever was necessary to keep Soul Society's peace. And I like that. They're a military organisation after all, everything about them isn't supposed to be warm and fuzzy, and while they are painted as the overall protagonists of the series, Kubo does a decent job of keeping the fuzziness to a minimum. But yeah, that's it for Ginjo's character essentially. The source material really didn't give us much, leaving us hanging with mere breadcrumbs regarding his life as a Shinigami and the true scope of the betrayal he actually suffered. Because while it's certainly dubious that the Soul Society would monitor him in such a way, it also makes some sense too. Ginjo, as the first ever Substitute Shinigami, is a complete unknown to them. They have no idea how this project will turn out, and so again, from the angle of self-preservation, it makes some sense. Sure, they probably could have been less duplicitous about it and actually been honest and upfront with Ginjo, you know, we're going to monitor you for a little while just to see how things pan out, but still, his abandonment and reckless murder always felt like a bit of an overreaction to not too heinous a betrayal. So it was great when Can't Fear Your Own World, one of the supplementary light novels that deals with a story in the aftermath of the Quincy Blood War, took it upon itself to tackle this topic directly, validating the notion that yes, we needed more on Ginjo to begin with to truly do this character justice. And interestingly, the architect of much of Ginjo's pain, the puppet master of the events surrounding his spiralling fall, is but a single man who never even appeared in Bleach at all. The villainous Tokinada Tsuneyashiro. We've talked about Tokinada in some depth on the channel before, specifically during my individual reviews of the 3 books in the Can't Fear Your Own World trilogy. But after secretly orchestrating the assassination of much of his own family, Tokinada became the head of the powerful Tsuneyashiro noble house, one of the great noble houses of the Soul Society, and plotted to replace the Soul King with a being of his own making. But what's most important about Tokinada for this video is his personality. Tokinada is an openly sadistic monster who enjoys cruelty for cruelty's sake and delights in watching people fall into crushing despair, particularly of his own engineering. Due to a combination of his own sinister desires and the Tsuneyashiro family's want for the Soul King remnants found in the bodies of Fullbringers, Tokinada manipulated events that would lead to the ultimate destruction of Ginjo's life as he knew it, and turn him against the Soul Society for good. So, what actually happened? Well, as it turns out, Ukitake is somewhat exonerated in this book. Where the source material seems to imply that Ukitake was in fact the callous schemer behind wanting to control the Substitute Shinigami, the truth is actually quite different where Ukitake's involvement is concerned. At some time before his recruitment into the throngs of the Gote, and after, Ginjo used to hang around with a group of Fullbringers, each finding solace in the company of the other. Ukitake did want to work with Ginjo, making him an associate of the 13th Division upon his appointment as a Substitute Shinigami, which makes sense as Ukitake is the one who started the program in the first place, giving him a badge at this point genuinely designed to be a personal license to act as evidence of Ginjo's own rank and station. And so it is cool to see that the origins of the Substitute Shinigami badge do come from a place of goodwill, and it was corrupted and defiled later on. And speaking of which, the Tsuneyashiro noble family wanted to get their hands on the all-powerful fragments of the Soul King found in each Fullbringer at birth. This is what makes them Fullbringers in the first place. The fragments of the Soul King act as pseudo-Hogyokus, essentially, giving them power, which also kind of explains why Chad and Orihime became quote-unquote Fullbringers after coming into contact or being in the proximity of the Hogyoku itself. But anyway, Tokinada, in an effort to locate Ginjo and his Fullbringer allies in order to get these fragments, transformed the Substitute Shinigami badge into a monitoring device. Ukitake, for his part, was kept in the dark as to why the noble family wanted to spy on Ginjo and actively opposed it, attempting to stand up to the Tsuneyashiro house until Tokinada stepped in with the final word, quashing Ukitake's rebellion. And this is a great show of force for the noble houses of the Soul Society. Admittedly, the Tsuneyashiro is about as prestigious and as high-ranking as it gets, and it goes to show that even senior captains like Ukitake have no chance when they decide to put their foot down, essentially. In the end, Ukitake hoped that Ginjo would be able to forgive him for whatever unwitting role he was playing in this deception. What Ukitake did and didn't know is an important piece of the puzzle, as it shows that the crumbling of his relationship with Ginjo was the result of a tragic miscommunication caused, of course, by Tokinada. Speaking of which, this time, totally unknown to Ukitake, Tokinada sent out a squad of assassins to find Ginjo's friends and allies, butchering them all for the Soul King fragments their bodies contained. Enraged by this betrayal and the fact that his friends had all been massacred, Ginjo then killed the Shinigami assassins himself in retaliation. Realizing that the badge had led the assassins to them, Ginjo believed it was Ukitake who had sent them, that the supposed peace-loving man, as he would later call him, who had brought him in, had now revealed his true colours and turned against him. Perhaps as far as Ginjo was concerned, he had outlived his usefulness in Ukitake's eyes, and that Ukitake had given him the badge in preparation for this moment which had been planned from the very beginning. Of course, this wasn't the case at all. At this point, Ukitake remains blissfully unaware of the murders that have just taken place, believing only that the noble house of Tsuneyashiro is monitoring Ginjo for reasons unknown. However, before Ginjo had a chance to speak with Ukitake about the events that just transpired, Tokinada got to Ukitake first, approaching him with the supposed truth of what had just unfolded. According to Tokinada, Ginjo had not only killed the Shinigami assassins, but in a blind fit of rage had also murdered his own Fullbringer friends and allies simply because he felt wronged by the eavesdropping plot of the nobles. And Tokinada was able to prove this, in quotes, thanks to having doctored footage of the event. As his family, the Suna Yashiros, were also in charge of the visuals department of the Gotei 13, and therefore Tokinada had access to the surveillance footage and was able to do with it as he pleased to create his narrative. Seeing this footage with a heavy heart, Ukitake had no choice but to label Ginjo as an enemy of the Shinigami, and because of this, Ginjo became a fugitive. Interestingly, Tokinada would later reveal that he actually wanted to tell Ukitake the whole truth, rather than hide behind the fake footage and then keep his mouth shut by kidnapping his younger siblings, but decided it would be best not to aggravate Mimihagi. And unfortunately for Ginjo, although really I don't see any way this could have gone any differently for him, he only made matters worse by later actually murdering many of Ukitake's own subordinates from the 13th Division, presumably during his escape when they tried to take him in, thus cementing him as a villain in the eyes of the Soul Society. And later, when Ginjo gets a chance to confront Tokinada himself during the events of Can't Fear Your Own World, Tokinada relishes in the fact that Ukitake actually genuinely believed in Ginjo, only to be so shattered by his anger and betrayal. There's something very melancholy about the fact that the truth is revealed after Ukitake is already dead. There's no chance here for real justice to be dispensed, or for Ukitake to ever get to see the good in Ginjo. There's no chance for Ginjo to speak with Ukitake once again, either to try and clear the air, for the two to maybe try and see eye to eye, and restore that sense of camaraderie. Kyoraku attempting to apologise to Ginjo on Ukitake's behalf is as good as it gets. Unless, of course, Ukitake does return in a potential Hell arc, but then I think the characters may have bigger things to worry about. And so, as we can see, Tokinada pulled the strings behind Ginjo's downfall. Ginjo Kugo is a tragic character, standing no chance at all against the relentless marching machine of Soul Society nobility and the corruption that spreads like a sickness from within. Ginjo is right to despise the Soul Society, but unfortunately his anger and hatred was misdirected. Anyway, with all that said and done, I'm very pleased we actually got a bit more on Ginjo and his backstory. As far as I'm concerned, this definitely makes for a more compelling, but crucially more believable reason as to why Ginjo would turn his back on the Soul Society. The character is still something of an enigma, and I think Ginjo continues to feel extremely unique within the universe of Bleach. There's still a lot of questions that need to be answered. But for now, this is the truth of Ginjo's betrayal and the role the Soul Society nobility played in bringing him to his knees. But that's it for the video, guys. I really hope you enjoyed it. Let me know in the comments below what you think of Ginjo Kugo, what you think of his character, both as he appears in the original source material and also the Can't Fear Your Own World light novels as well. Do you find this answer to why he was betrayed, why he felt betrayed, and why he effectively became a villain to be satisfying or not? Let me know your comments and your thoughts down below. I'd love to hear them. Guys, make sure to hit subscribe if you haven't done already. Check out Mr. Tomo Talks Games. And until next time, I'll catch you later, and I'll see you then.